All right, let's try that one more time. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shelby Maria Edwards. I'm the Executive Director of the Charlottesville Public Housing Association of Residents, also known as CFR. We're a not-for-profit organization that is dedicated to advocating for and with public housing residents. We are entirely governed by public housing residents and one Section 8 resident. As the duly recognized and federally mandated representative of all residents of public housing, we work closely, but we are separate from the Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority. We have 4 FAR focus areas, including our FAR internship program, which is a paid civic engagement opportunity for all residents 18 and older. Our second area is Residents for Respectful Research, or R3. For that program, we believe that residents have the right to participate in the research being done at all levels, and this is done in partnership with UVA's Equity Center. Thirdly, we have our community organizing, which includes our FAR youth program and oral histories. And then lastly, we have housing redevelopment, which most people are familiar with. Today, we are talking about 24 CFR 964. And we want to be clear that this is a HUD regulation. So if that sounds like a lot of alphabet soup, it is a thing. 24 CFR has all the regulations that all housing authorities should follow and the administration of vouchers. But for organizing purposes, we tend to emphasize 964. But in order to do the work we do, Congress, makes the statutes and the laws, and HUD turns those laws and regulations and filters them down to the locality, et cetera. And the federal law supersedes the state law for public housing. So again, we're focusing on 24 CFR 964. So firstly, I know we have Mariah here with us from LAJC. And originally we were going to talk a little bit about the regulation itself and tenant organizing. Would you mind starting us off, Mariah, and talking about that?
Sure. I can definitely chime in and set the foundation for what the main rights are for public housing residents. So the gist of 24 CFR 964 is to basically empower residents to be involved in their livelihood and in their communities in the most active way possible, to ensure that they have a say in what their lives look like in their community and what their lives look like in public housing. So it means residents get actively involved in their community and the community's well-being, while also seeking to form a collaborative relationship with the housing authority. So in the public housing program, it's about tenant participation and working closely with the housing authority. So this allows tenants to get involved in issues regarding the quality of life, resident satisfaction, and some other self-help initiatives that are geared towards making their lives as full and as elevated as possible as public housing residents. And this the HUD regulation allows public housing residents to organize as a group, and it's helpful to organize as a group, and it's important to protect that right with the regulation. It elevates the issue to not just an individual concern, but collective concern that can be brought to the attention of the housing authority and potentially HUD. And then it's also a bit of protection for residents when residents are fearful of retaliation. So it creates a buffer for families to feel comfortable when bringing issues regarding their communities and their housing conditions, or whatever their concern may be. Examples of things that tenants can organize around are conditions issues, organizing for certain amenities, advocating for or against policy changes regarding the administration of the public housing program and how things are run and processed in their community, and just in general, addressing other concerns of the residents. So any concern that comes up, 24 CFR 964 pretty much empowers residents to be very active participants in how the program is run and the benefits that they can yield from the program, which is the ultimate goal of the public housing program, I would say. So I'll hand it off to Joy to talk a little bit more in depth about how important 24 CFR 964 is to public housing residents.
Hi, good afternoon. So 964, 24 CFR talks about everything that have to do with this Section 8 subsidy in public housing, and it talks about every nitty-gritty piece of how a housing authority should be run. Included in that, there is 963, which is public housing contracting with resident-owned business. And then it also have 964, which talk about resident organization and how they should operate and what role they play with the housing authority. Again, as Mariah said before, 24 CFR it's a statute. It was created by Congress, and HUD breaks it down into subparts of all of this. FAR, because we chose to be a citywide organization, we focus on 964 a lot. And in the first part of subpart A, as I said before, there is 963, which is about contracting with resident businesses. And then you have 964 .1 talks about the purpose. And the purpose of this part is to recognize that the importance of residents' involvement in creating a positive living environment and in actively participating in the overall mission of public housing. So there is a purpose to it. There's a scope to it, and there is a lot of subparts. What residents mean, who is the eligible residents? Talk about family investments centers, resident management contract, coordinating, mobilizing. But when we get to, okay, so this is what you want to do. You want to have your own, resident association. It talks about, it spells out what is the role and the duties of a resident council. And so under 964 subpart B, 964.100 to be exact, it said the role of the resident council, of a resident council, is to improve the quality of life and resident satisfaction and participate in self-help initiative to enable residents to create a positive living environment for families living in public housing. Resident councils may actively participate through a working partnership with the housing authority to advise, and assist in all aspects of public housing. So you can be just a resident council, and they have, that can be found under 964.115. It tells you what those requirements are for HUD to recognize you as a individual resident council, but it also tells you about a jurisdiction-wide resident council, which that's what FAR is. And the jurisdiction-wide resident council may come together to form an organization which can represent the interests of the resident residing in units under the housing authority jurisdiction. This can be accomplished by the president of a duly elected resident council forming an organization, by resident council electing a representative to the organization, or through jurisdiction-wide election. If duly elected resident council form such an organization, the housing authority shall recognize it as the voice of the authority-wide residents for input into the housing authority policy making. So that is talking about, this is what a jurisdiction-wide resident council is. It talks about the function, and I just read it real quickly. The function of the jurisdiction-wide council may advise the Board of Commissioners and executive director in all area of housing authority operation, including but not limited to occupancy, general management, maintenance, security, resident training, resident employment, social service, and modernization priorities. So it's a whole gamut of stuff. Um, I'll pause right there so we can have a conversation about it.
All right, all right. Well, obviously, Joy and Mariah just laid out a lot of different elements. And I think something that Joy highlighted that is particularly important is that the work we do at FAR is rooted in objectivity, right? It's not like FAR has decided this is how we want to operate. We're going to pick and choose. No, we're following regulations. And that's part of the reason that we have as much power. And again, to highlight a part of the policy, so I'm reading 24 CFR 964.11. It says HUD policy on tenant participation, quote, HUD promotes resident participation in the active involvement of residents in all aspects of a housing authority's overall mission and operation. Residents have a right to organize and elect a resident council to represent their interests, unquote. I think that this particular, all of this section is important, but this one's particularly important because it speaks to rights, which Mariah touched on earlier. And also as far as mission, the resident participation aspect is so important. I think for some people, they take for granted the importance of having a voice and having support. And for a lot of people, FAR is not the voice of the residents, we're the amplifier of the residents, or if folks want to speak on their behalf, FAR is happy to do so. Part of FAR's mission obviously is to educate and empower residents. Joy, in your opinion, how does this regulation educate and empower residents or promote the education and empowerment of residents?
Well, there are some other things embedded in 964 that talk about if you do have a resident council and you go through all of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 steps, A, B, C, D, E, F steps that HUD would come in and look at. It also talks about the housing authority providing training for residents. So they talk about who's eligible. They also talk about election procedure, which we follow, resident involvement operation. But 964.140 talk about resident training and resident training opportunity. So, and I think you touched on it a little bit, but I can get a little bit more deeper into it to answer your question. It's a resident training opportunities. HUD encourage and participate between a partnership between the resident, the housing authority and HUD, as well as with the public and nonprofit sectors to provide training opportunity for public housing residents. The category in which training could occur include, but they are not limited to, community organization and leadership training, organization development training for resident management corporation and duly elected resident council, public housing policy, program rights, responsibility training, and business training, planning, and job skill, local training resources. HUD encouraged to use the local training resources to ensure the ongoing accessibility and availability of persons to provide training and technical assistance. Possibly training resource may include resident organization, housing authority, local community college, vocational school, and HUD or federal agency and other local, private, and nonprofit organization. Now, what I would tell you is that I started out with MACA, Monticello Area Community Action Agency. And MACA had an organization they had an organizing component to their training. And so Bertha Armstrong, Jude Mason, Shay Johnson, and quite a few more people. Those were the core people who took me under their wing. Priscilla Whiting took me under their wing and started showing me or helping me to get the training. I was on the Head Start Policy Council. And after having been on the Head Start Policy Council, I was on the MACA board. Those things launched me into really opening my eyes about what are the things that we should be involved with and what are the things that we aren't involved with. So those were things that were able to help training, going to conferences. Anyone who have been to a conference with me know I go to the conferences, one, to really learn about some stuff, but also to network with people to see how they're doing things in other places. So again, I think 964.140 lay out through the regulations how you can obtain training. It's for us to be able to utilize those training. One of the things that is not, that is, that is not, we have not done well, or that agency has not done well by us, is the community college, right? So there is a lot of ways that the community college, because it talks about local community college and vocational school that can train us in different things. So training, I always immerse myself into whatever training that the housing authority. Now, one thing, a lot of housing authority do not want their residents to go to training with them because they don't want their residents to know what they know. But there has been different executive director who allowed me to go, but because I was also a housing authority board member, I took advantage of that as the resident board member to go to training. So there's different way to massage that, right? But it spells it out in 964.140.
Amazing. Well, thank you. Thank you. Like Joyce said, this HUD regulation is so important. And we are fortunate in this era of CRHA to have an amicable relationship with them. Because Joy's right, there are a lot of places around the country and a lot of organizations that don't value working with residents. And we're so grateful for the current administration of CRHA to work so effortlessly with FAR and our initiatives. So
I do want to say too that somewhere down in here, I was looking for it. Once HUD recognized you as a duly elect resident organization, HUD provide funding as to help support capacity building. That's what the money is for. It's for capacity building to be able to bring more people into the fold, and that's $25 per occupied unit. So the more, if you have units that are not occupied, you get less money. If you have units that are occupied, you get more money. But that money doesn't go really far, right? It doesn't pay for organizers, right? All of that has to be volunteered work. FAR had some good supporters who believed in what the regulation said and went out to raise money by writing grants, by doing, applying for some CBDG dollars, private donations, and grants to help to get us a staff. Because if anyone know anything about organizing, organizing is not a just 8-hour job. Organizing is like 24/7, 365 days of the year. But anyway, you need staff to be able to do that. And so we had help like legal aid support us. And they were able to help train us and show us and guide us in how we could do that. And so we have organizers. And it took us years and years and years to get an executive director, because if you have staff, you have to have someone to guide the staff. And if you're a board member, sometimes that is like walking a thin line. And then Mariah can tell you a little bit more about that. So eventually we had to figure out how we could still continue with FAR, and then finally hire an executive director. So the little money that HUD gives us won't get you there. So I just want to put that out there. It takes hard work, grant writing, fundraising, begging, snoozing. I don't snooze, well, but there are other people who does on behalf of all.
I just wanted to echo what Joy said. She's right. So the $25 per occupied unit, that only makes up about 3% of FAR's total budget. Now, CRHA is supportive, so that number might increase in the future. But in the meantime, Joy's right. Most of our budget is grant funded and through individual gifts in the community. So if you are interested in making a gift to FAR, you can go to www.farcivil.org. You will receive a thank you letter from yours truly and or someone else in the organization. Does anybody have any other thoughts that they want to share before we wrap up today's live about 24 CFR 964?
I just want to point out, because I think some people think that FAR is a service organization. What FAR is, we find that policy, and that's a service, so maybe I misspoke, because changing policy is trying to make sure the policies are fair to both sides. But we deal with a lot of policies that either impacts our residents, that needs to be fair. And so when HUD say, we want you to use this money to do capacity building, basically it's a hard job, because a lot of residents who doesn't live in public housing, who live in Section 8, they're not even a part of their neighborhood organization, nor are they part of a homeowner association. But, in public housing, you can do that. And capacity building takes years to build a relationship. Capacity building is nothing but having a relationship with people, getting them to see not my dream, but for them to bring their values to the table. And I always tell people, everybody who come to the table have come with a different value. And we have to figure out how we make chicken noodle soup out of it, right? Which means we have to support each other. And sometimes that's not there.
I just want to echo a little bit about what Joy said, because she's right. FAR does not provide a direct service, but that doesn't mean we're not service providers. Can I get an amen from the virtual screen? A lot of the work we do does focus on policies. It focuses on empowering the residents to make sure that they're looking at the rules and regulations that affect them from day to day. I like to equate FAR's work to a quote that my mom said a couple of years back. It's like, there was a farmer walking down a river and he saw a baby floating around. So he grabbed the baby and he saved it. Then he saw another baby. So he grabbed that baby. And then so grabbing the babies out of the water, right? That's a direct service. But then the farmer said to himself, I'm going to go upstream and figure out where the babies are coming from so that we don't have to do this to begin with. And I would like to think that FAR is that farmer that that actualized, what it meant to solve a problem at the root. And so I have loved FAR ever since I was a youngin', and I would like to think that that service that we provide, though it may not be direct, it is directly going to the reasons that things exist to begin with. Does that make sense, y'all?
Yeah, it makes lots of sense. Because sometimes you have to go out of your comfort zone. Sometimes you have to stand alone. So yeah.
Amazing. Well, listen, thanks y'all so much for joining us for episode 2 of Public Housing Speaks, where we talked about 24 CFR 964. Our next one is scheduled for next week. It'll be July 27th around 4 p.m. And we plan to host another one after that very soon. Like I said, my name is Shelby Edwards. I'm the current executive director of FAR, and we'll talk to y'all soon. Thank you. Thank you.